Today we're going to be doing a lighting breakdown using two lights from ZHIYUN, the ZHIYUN X200 and the FIVERAY M40 SE. So these are really nice little lights. The X200 is a punchy 200 watt bicolor light. It's got a bones mount, and the cherry on top is that it can be powered with V-mount batteries. The M40 is a tiny little 40 watt sort of pocket light. It's also bicolor and has its own internal battery. Just because these are smaller lights doesn't mean that you can't use them in creative ways or in different environments, including shooting with windows and daylight. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can use these lights in setups using natural lights. Usually when we're shooting with windows in our scene or daylight, we look to use bigger fixtures, something like a 1200 watt light or larger. But we don't always have access to those kind of lights, and they're not always practical in smaller spaces, and often too bulky to use when we're working on our own. So if we're clever about using natural light, then we can actually use smaller lights to our advantage and augment what's already there. So that's what we're going to look at. Thanks to ZHIYUN for sponsoring this video. Bear in mind this is a product showcase and not a full independent review, and there will be links to buy these lights in the description down below. In this first setup, we're using a pretty basic 3-point lighting technique, but what makes it interesting is that we're using daylight as our key and the ZHIYUN lights as our fill and backlight. So we're using the X200 to fill in some of the shadows on Steph, and the M40 is serving as a warm backlight motivated by the lamp. So the first thing to do on a scene like this is to obviously set the exposure on the camera. That means dragging the exposure right down using ND or stopping down the lens, to make sure that the windows aren't clipped and to make sure the exposure on Steph's face is correct. So the light outside and the sky are a little lower in exposure than earlier in the day, but it's still bright compared to the interior. Because we're going for a more naturalistic look and of course using actual daylight, I'm okay with the level on Steph's face being slightly brighter. Because we dragged down the exposure and because the interior is much darker relative to the outside, we're now creating a lot of contrast and a lot of shadow in the scene, and we need to address that. So the first thing I do is switch on this practical lamp to fill in some of the background shadows and get a bit of color contrast with the warmth of this light. And as you can see, because we have dragged the exposure on the camera down so much, it's not really adding too much, and it's certainly not backlighting Steph. To augment that, I'm using the little FIVERAY M40. It's got mounting points built into it, so I'm just sticking it on a light stand in the background, and then twisting the Kelvin dial to push it to around 3200 Kelvin, because it's bicolor, to match the practical lamp. And you can see now that this is pushing a nice warm backlight onto Steph. There's plenty of output on this little light, so we're probably only running it around 10–20%. It also comes with this nice little diffuser which helps soften it up a bit and just blend it into the scene, so that we believe that this warm light is coming from the lamp behind Steph. We could have stopped here if we wanted something a little bit more moody, just using the daylight and the warm backlight, but I just wanted to push a bit more light onto Steph's face so we could see her a little bit and create a slightly more naturalistic looking scene, something a little bit less moody. So this is where the X200 comes in. So I'm just using it to kind of fill in the shadow on Steph's face and kind of just extend the coverage of light around her just so we can see a bit more of her, make it less moody. So it's boomed overhead, and I'm using this cute little softbox from ZHIYUN. It comes with 2 layers of diffusion and an egg crate. It's pretty nice actually. If you get it close enough to your subject, it provides quite a nice soft quality of light. But the light has a bones mount, so you can use all of your pre-existing bones mounts accessories as well, which is really cool for a light of this size, and it's a pretty solid mount as well. But this tiny softbox is really useful because we're working with quite a low ceiling, and it means that we can get the softbox quite close up to Steph as well. To sell this look, we're blending in the intensity and color temperature of the X200 with the ambient light. And because the light is out of reach, thankfully ZHIYUN have a really good app, so I'm just dialing in the settings using my phone. And then finally, just to sort of finish things up, I just wanted to soften up the light even more. So I added a final layer of diffusion with some artificial silk, which I've just clipped on, and you can see here with and without. But this is just kind of smoothing everything out even more and creating an even more delicate wrap around her face. And I think it was just the final piece in really blending that wrap between the natural light and artificial light. Obviously using all of that diffusion, we've got the 2 internal layers, the egg crate, the extra diffusion that I used, that's going to suck up a ton of output, but it is a pretty punchy light. It's 200 watts. So before I added the diffusion, I think we were running it around 80%. And then when I added that artificial silk, we had enough headroom to push it up to 100. I think if I needed a little bit more output, I would have just removed the internal layer of diffusion and or the egg crate. It's pretty simple, but I think it looks quite natural and nice. It's a nice subtle lighting wrap around Steph's face. And as we got to the end of the filming session, you know, the sun got lower in the sky and it began to filter through the trees and the leaves, and we just got this really beautiful, dapple, dynamic lighting effect, which I just thought looked really nice considering the sort of low footprint lighting setup we have. Just to recap, here we are with all the lights off, the practical, the M40 backlight, and then the X200 fill. We've moved outside now because I wanted to test a setup running the X200 off batteries. So it's between golden hour and blue hour now, and this is a great time of day to shoot outside because, you know, the exposure of the sky is going to be much lower than during midday, which means you're not having to drag stuff down as much in camera to balance exposure. And you're just not going to have to create as much contrast in your scene and then have to balance it out with additional lighting. But even so, we still need to push some light onto Steph because the scene is still quite underlit at the moment. What I love about the X200 is that it not only accepts V-mount batteries directly onto the unit, but it also can support dual V-mounts to run the light at 100% output, which we definitely need to do here for this scene. And if you have two high capacity batteries, you should be able to run the light for over an hour at full output. Being able to run such a punchy light on batteries outside and still run it on high output is fantastic. So it just avoided me having to trail mains power from a window, avoided tripping hazards, and just gave me way more freedom in where I could place my light. So we're diffusing the light again with the softbox, which has got dual diffusion in it and an egg crate. And that again takes away a lot of output, and we're still fighting quite a lot of ambient light. I also experimented with the extra layer of diffusion, the artificial silk, but I think I actually preferred it with just the softbox on its own. I found that this layer of diffusion was sucking out too much output, and it was just washing out her face a little bit and removing some of the sculpting that the egg crate was providing. So with just the softbox alone, the light was a little bit more sculpting and it had a little bit more shape and definition in her face. And as it's bicolor, we can then fine tune the color temperature of the light to match what we're having in the environment. So I think we were running the light at around 5200 Kelvin at this point. Then, as in the previous scene, we're using the little M40 as a hair light or edge light. And again, I've got it set to warm, a sort of like golden hour tone to really pump a bit of color and color contrast into the scene and light up the back of Steph's head and sort of pick her out from the background. And then it's all about just sort of blending stuff in with the natural light. So here you can see without the lights, with the backlight, and then the key. There are a few things I'd probably improve here. I probably would have waited a bit later until the outside light had gone down even more. And with the M40, I think I should have probably also have experimented with placing it on the other side of Steph's head, because the direction of the light in terms of motivation and natural light is coming from that side. And it doesn't quite make sense that we're getting a key and then a warmer backlight on the other side. Maybe I'm overthinking it, and maybe if it was something a little bit more stylized, you'd get away with it. But I guess with this more naturalistic look, the sort of like realism of it maybe doesn't quite make sense. I don't know, let me know in the comments down below. So there's a lot you can do with these little lights. They're very versatile. In fact, we're using them now. We've used them in this video, and I've been using them over the last few YouTube videos to help light my talking head. So we've got the X200 up here and the M40 in the background back there. So if you wanted a really small scale lighting package for basic interviews, or even just a permanent setup for a YouTube talking head that was low footprint, these might be a really nice option to check out. Anyway, I hope these lighting breakdowns were useful. They're designed to give you a bit of inspiration using affordable kit and what you can do with it. Shout out to ZHIYUN for sponsoring this video. They're actually going to be running a sale on these lights. Definitely check that out to pick up a discount. Links to these lights will be in the description down below, and I believe there's also a discount code available as well. Everything in this video was obviously graded with my Hackney Power Grade and LUTs. Check those out if you like the look of stuff. But that's it. Thanks for watching. My name's Ed, and until next time, I'll see you later. See you. Way to make it work and find another route.